my eye was caught first thing this morning by the front page of the Times, which essentially reports that smear Keir is about to become government policy, or at least that ministers who have spoken to the Times are urging Rishi Sunak to adopt smear Keir as the sort of last roll of the dice in this election campaign. You can never say never. You really can't. But if the gap was going to narrow, I think it would have narrowed by now. So barring some sort of act of God or some sort of extraordinary event, the game seems to be almost up, doesn't it? Grant Shapps talking again this morning in terms that accept defeat and try to frame the conversation as minimising the size of the Labour majority. They've introduced a meaningless word into the British political lexicon, supermajority, which has a substantive meaning in American politics, but means absolutely nothing in this country. So now they're trying to spook the horses by warning that Labour's victory is going to be too big. I don't really get that tactic. I don't know quite how they imagine people responding to that. If people were going to be spooked by a big Labour majority, they'd be spooked by a big Labour majority. I don't think there's a point at which you become spooked according to the size of the majority. You may disagree. That's how the programme works. But I don't quite go, oh, yes, 80-seat majority, that'd be great. But 150, oh, no, I'm changing my vote as a consequence. I just don't get it. Do you get it? I don't get it. But here's the thing. We flirted last week. What day was it last week? Where we flirted with the idea of beginning to be in danger of beginning to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. I'm delighted to report that danger passed. I don't think there's any prospect of me ever feeling sorry for the fella, except in the most sort of fundamental human way. Just as in you would, if you were watching someone being pecked to death by crows, you'd feel sorry for them even if you hated their guts, even if it was your sworn enemy. Well, I would anyway. Maybe you're a bit more sadistic than me, or a bit more given to Schadenfreude. The point here is that they don't know what to do. They haven't got a clue. All of the traditional tactics have failed. The screaming and cheerleading of the client media has done absolutely nothing to nudge the needle. Even the sensible voices now are talking in apocalyptic terms. Those of us who have sort of held back from hyperbole or waited for the Ming vase to shatter into a million pieces as Keir Starmer tries to shepherd it across the ice rink or the polished dance floor, whatever metaphor you preserve. It seems to me to be all over bar the shouting when I look at the sort of commentariat and when I look at the right-wing media. If you want a mark of how mad things have become, the Daily Telegraph is now warning that everyone's going to have to emigrate to get away from the Labour Party. They're going to be absolutely gutted when they find out that we've abolished freedom of movement. And also that the prospect of being an economic migrant for Daily Telegraph writers is absolutely fine if you're white and British, but absolutely unacceptable if you're neither. But anyway, those are the riddles and the wrestling matches that the right-wing media are going to have to deal with. So what I find extraordinary is the idea, I could base this story here, the idea that the Tories have looked at their current performance, their current polling. They've looked at where Rishi Sunak stands or sits on the political spectrum, on the voting spectrum. And do you know what they've decided? They've decided that they're being too nice, that the public think they're too nice. Suella Braverman has sort of signed up to this idea that they haven't been nasty enough. They haven't been close enough to the bile that Farage peddles every day. No prizes for guessing which party lost a candidate last night over support for the British National Party. But the idea that they haven't moved far enough to the right, on the one hand, and then on the personal level, that they haven't been nasty enough about Keir Starmer. So that's where they are now. Rishi Sunak, I'm reading, is being urged by cabinet ministers and senior Tories to go for the jugular and launch more direct personal attacks against Sir Keir Starmer. So the areas in which they think he could be attacked are claiming that he wants to rejoin the single market or reintroduce free movement, Their source added, he will sign a deal with the French. He will undo Brexit. He will rip apart our institutions. The guy's a socialist, and there's a real chance people will give him a free rein if they back reform, which, of course, the Tories are terrified of. Labour has said that it won't rejoin the single market or reintroduce free movement if it wins the election. But still, the idea that they're going to hit Keir Starmer with personality politics says to me that they're possibly even more desperate than we noticed, than we realised. One cabinet minister told The Times, Rishi is a really nice and deeply honourable guy. I'm not sure whether he is uncomfortable instinctively with the personalised attacks, but it has been more generalised so far. So they want Sunak to target Starmer over, wait for it, his support for Jeremy Corbyn, who is, of course, no longer in the Labour Party, as a direct consequence of Keir Starmer's leadership and Jeremy Corbyn's conduct. His decision to campaign for a second referendum on Brexit, just as the opinion polls reflect the fact that the British public is absolutely persuaded that Brexit was a disaster or is a disaster, and his work as a human rights lawyer, which involves misleading the public into thinking that lawyers have a great amount of agency over what cases they take and don't take. And so all three of those attack lines seem to me to be desperate. But I could be wrong. So here is your question. Here is your first question of the week as the election looms ever closer. And we'll be looking today at your final opportunities to get signed up, to get registered to vote, something which is, I would argue, of absolutely paramount importance. What would you do? What would you do? If you were in charge of the Conservative election campaign, if you were Rishi Sunak, what would you do now? What might, in your view, limit the losses? Or even if your glass is more than half full, deliver an unexpected victory, snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. What would you actually do? Because I'm not sure I'd know where to start. I'm pretty sure that lurching further to the right is absolutely disastrous behaviour. And every time you try to appease that kind of nativist snarl, the nativist snarl will just get louder. It's extraordinary how little they've learned about the consequences of letting racist liars into the heart of public discourse to tell their racist lies and then try to appease some of the people responding to the racist lies by talking about deporting asylum seekers or leaving the European Union or whatever it may be. This idea that you can somehow snuff out racist lies by trying to woo the people that have fallen for the racist lies is it's categorically disastrous. It's actually a road to fascism, as history has taught us a million times. But if you think that's wrong, or you can explain to me how chasing the same voters that are sort of tempted by Farage's bile, then that might work. Or is there any way to stop? Which I would have thought that logic dictated, especially now that you're in an election campaign period and you don't have to be held hostage by the right of your own party. This is actually just about getting voters. I would have thought that the obvious play would be to move in the other direction and try to woo some people back to the Tory fold who are currently intending not to vote for them, but who might conceivably have voted for them in the past. So what on earth would you do in policy terms or in campaigning terms? Where do you think Keir Starmer, or indeed the Labour front bench, where are they vulnerable? They tried to go after Angela Rayner because of her housing arrangements from 15 years ago, and that, as everybody knew, that was as damp a squib as the curry that Keir Starmer had in Durham. I wonder if that's part of their problem. I wonder if because I presume that you don't actually immerse yourself in the client media every morning. You just rely upon me to give you a quick heads up on what's going on. If that sounds a little immodest, I apologise. But according to the Press Gazette, I'm the most influential journalist in the country at the moment. So I'll allow myself a little moment of suggesting that perhaps you rely on me for knowing what the right-wing media is doing, what the client journalists are pretending. But if you follow these clowns on social media, or if you read the bills that they churn out in the Telegraph and the Mail and the Sun and the Express, maybe they believe it. Maybe all the people surrounding Rishi Sunak thought that Angela Rayner's Council House or Keir Starmer's Curry were actually massive zingers and were actually going to be, hugely significant vote swingers. Maybe they're sitting there thinking, but hang on a minute, we've attacked him for being a lawyer. We've attacked him for actually doing some legal work when he was actually a legal worker. And it just isn't working. And maybe they believe this. They actually think, well, what we'll do, we'll keep clobbering him with Jeremy Corbyn and hope that nobody's noticed Jeremy Corbyn is not in the Labour Party anymore. I mean, do you see what I mean? If you're trying to work out how they could have ended up in such a mess, the answer might be that they have got high on their own supply. Oh, that works. I do like that phrase. They've got high on their own supply, haven't they? So you look at a Braverman or a Badenoch, and they are not trying to cannibalise the reform vote. They are, in a sense, reform voters, especially Braverman. We're dreaming of deporting people. So they are actually creatures of the client media, not just beneficiaries of it. They're creatures created by it. They are every bit as signed up to the nonsense that Brexit is going well, or the nonsense that we can somehow survive as an economy without workers coming in at a rate of not. All of this, they actually believe it. They actually believe it. But Sunak doesn't, and he doesn't have to be held hostage by these people. So what would you do now? How many days away is the election? So is it a fortnight on Thursday? I think it's probably a fortnight on Thursday, isn't it? So you've got 2.5 weeks. I don't know why my voice went weird then. It sounded like I was selling goods. 2.5 weeks. Roll up. 2.5 weeks. You've got 2.5 weeks in which to turn this election around. You are Rishi Sunak. What are you going to do?